I'm not pulling out of my driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for the Drive to Work Coronavirus Edition. So I have a fun guest today, Brian David Marshall of many things. We'll talk all about that today. So welcome, Brian.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the question I ask everybody. How did you first start to play Magic? How did you learn about Magic?
So I was working for a chain of comic book stores in New York City. I was doing marketing and promotion for them, putting on signings. This is like right around Death of Superman and the Image boom. And all these huge events are happening in comics. And I had come out of PR and was working for this comic store, doing like their marketing, and also sort of as the guy who played games would answer questions from people who had questions about games. And so people kept coming in and asking if we had any of that magic or magic. And at first I thought they were talking about like Mage. There was like a White Wolf product. And finally someone just was like, grabbed me. I've told this story before, but it's true. Like picked me up by the lapels of my jacket and shook me against like the Warhammer miniatures. And he's like, why can't I find this bleeping game anywhere? And so he stormed off or was arrested or something. And I dusted myself off and was like, okay, we need to figure out what this product is and we need to carry it. and it was a while, right? This is right in between the beta and unlimited release of Magic. And there'd been very, very, very little beta in New York City. Not a lot of it on the East Coast, but Unlimited came out and we weren't able to get any in the store, but me and my friends were able to buy a bunch of Unlimited starters and some Unlimited boosters and start playing. And that's how I got into Magic. And I've literally never stopped.
Okay.
I probably haven't gone 2 weeks without playing Magic in the intervening 27 years.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I have a lot of parallels because I also worked in a game store and I first learned about it because people asked me about it. So that's kind of funny. Okay, so you went from learning how to play. So the first thing I know of you as far as interacting with Magic is you were one of the first people to run tournaments really anywhere. In New York, especially a high-profile tournament. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the first thing I actually tried to do with Magic before running tournaments was get the license to make a Magic comic. I actually flew out to the old office before, the original, whatever that building was.
Right. The old office now.
Yeah, the old, exactly. With Glenn Friedman, who was my partner in Gray Matter. And we put together 4 painted pages of a story called A Council of Dragons, which was about the Elder Dragons, with I think Dennis Calero, who's a somewhat successful artist these days, but at the time was like a student. But they were really cool. But then I think Dark Horse got the license. But anyway, that was the first thing I tried to do. And then I was like, fine, we'll run a tournament. And so we put together a tournament in November of 1994 at the Roosevelt Hotel, RIP. They just announced that they're closing. At the Roosevelt Hotel for a set of Arabian Nights. There had been some small tournaments. There had been a gathering at the Seaport in New York earlier that year, had 40 or 50 people. And Paul Girardi is someone who had run a tournament on Staten Island at some point but people were still treating these tournaments as we're going to do a tournament. Come in, play, go home. And coming from this marketing background and coming from, remembering fondly these New York comic conventions, I really loved the idea of a tournament being more of an event than just coming in for round one and leaving when you lose. So we put together an event that really, in a lot of ways, looked like what you would think of as a Magic Fest now. We had artists there. We had Melissa Benson, Jeff Menges, and I think Ed Beard were 3 artists who were at that first event. We had, we had tournaments, we had side events, we had vendors, and we tried. We would go through the duel list and look for new formats to try. Right, 2-headed giant at one event, but it was super cool, and we had some 200 people show up. And, it was kind of like, wow, this is crazy. We knew nothing about, I mean, we didn't have any even idea what we were doing, but we figured it out pretty quickly. The tournament ran well, people didn't leave, and we kept doing them. We ran another one in February for a set of Legends and had over 1,000 people show up.
Okay, so at some point you go from running tournaments with Gray Matter to opening up a store. How did that happen? To Neutral Ground, how did that happen?
So we ran that tournament in February with 1,000 players. And then we ran another tournament in March that also had, some above north of 700 people. And other people are starting to run tournaments at this point. People have certainly seen that it's successful. But our tournament our third tournament was really bad for us because we had a limit on the amount of time for the room. We couldn't get people to leave. We could not get people to go home when they were done. They just wanted to be around other people who played Magic. I know of at least 3 couples that met and married from those first handful of events because it was this nexus of people who loved gaming, who loved the art, it was, there was something going on. And I was like, I feel like people are just very hungry for something that will let them be around people who have similar interests, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you have that experience of walking into a comic book store or a game store for the first time and feeling like as you cross over that threshold into the store, you'd stepped into some new chapter of your life, right? The first time that happens, you're like, oh my God, there's other people who like the same things I like, who are as passionate about it as I am, who are going to be here every Wednesday waiting for the new books, right? And this was the same thing, except it was a demand that wasn't being met anywhere. Yes, there were game stores, but they didn't have a place to play. Yes, there were comic stores that sold games, but you'd be playing on a bunch of long boxes. We really wanted to create a place that was, we invented the term tournament center for neutral ground, right? It was called Finally a Place, our tagline was Finally a Place to Game in New York. It was a tournament center. We had first space was 2,500 square feet in Manhattan on the 9th floor, sometimes up 9 flights of stairs, sometimes up an elevator, right? And we were open 7 days a week, and we had a 7-day-a-week Magic tournament schedule. We had other games going on. We had role-playing sessions and, miniatures and whatever else. But, our focus was Magic. We sold singles. We were the only place in Manhattan that sold singles. And it was really kind of amazing. I remember, we charged a membership. That was the other thing that was crazy. You could come in and shop in the store, but if you wanted to use the tournament center, I think it was $7 a day, $30 or $35 a month, or $250 for an annual membership. And that gave you full access to, being able to play and do everything and hang out and discounts on some tournaments. I don't remember. And I was just like, well, this is crazy. We have no idea if anyone's going to do this, right? We didn't even know if anyone would ever pay $7 to come in, right? And we opened, and within 2 minutes of the day we opened, Steve and Dan O'Mahony Schwartz walked in with a check for $500 from their mother for 2 annual memberships. And, it just kind of took off from there.
So I often tell the story. I remember my first story of meeting you. I don't know if that's the first story of you meeting me, but we'll see if these will line up. So there was an event in New York called The Gathering,
yes,
which was for Homelands. We did a big promotional event. We rented out a couple floors, and we had tournaments and a weird haunted house thing. And anyway, we had this big event, and like the night before or the night after, one of the nights that we weren't running the thing, a bunch of us came and visited Neutral Ground, which is the first time I'd ever been to Neutral Ground, and the first time I remember meeting you. I don't know if you and I had interacted before that, but the first time I remember meeting you.
So. I don't think you would have been. When did you start working at Wizards?
This is prior to me full time. This is me when I'm just a freelancer. Okay. So
I'd been out to Wizards once in very early '94, and that would have been the only opportunity.
Right, I wasn't there in '94, so
yeah, that makes sense.
But I remember it was very exciting. Like the idea of a place to play. Like now, it's kind of that's what game stores are. But that wasn't the thing. People that don't know their history. Like the idea of having place to play in your game store, which is now a staple, just most stores did not do that. And I remember we were impressed, like, look at all these tables. It was very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a game space first and a store second, right? Like, when we moved around the corner after like 2 years, we were on 7th Avenue between 26th and 27th, and we moved around the corner to 26th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue. And that was the second space, which was on the 4th floor of a loft building, was 5,000 square feet, a little more than 5,000 square feet. But only about 500 of that was dedicated to retail. The rest was all dedicated to tabletops to play, maybe some terrain tables, maybe a computer area with some network computers to play games. But for the most part, we could see 250 players for a tournament, for a PTQ or for a Masters, whatever the Masters Gateway tournament.
Okay, so the next,
one of my favorite sets of photos from coverage.
Okay, the next big thing I have here is, so in February, I think it was February of 1996, so Scaff Elias had really got the idea of that the next level was we needed to make something for players to aspire to, and was formation of the Pro Tour. And I had worked very closely with Scaff, and I know, by the way, that your tournaments were there were a bunch of successes out there that we used as templates, and Grey Matter was one of the ones I know we used as a template for things we were trying to do. And then was it the Puck Building? So
yeah,
PT1, the first Pro Tour, and you were at the first Pro Tour, right?
I was. By the way, if you've ever watched Will and Grace, you have seen the location of the first Pro Tour, because Grace's office building, whenever they show the exterior, is the Puck Building. So, I like to pretend that people are going to a Pro Tour anytime Will and Grace is on. But, I was at the first Pro Tour. We had it was very exciting when people, we obviously had a very tournament savvy crowd coming to our events, right? People who were playing at these now 2 to 3 times a month on the East Coast. There were $1,000 tournaments and tournaments for a full set of Power and so you could, and again, every day, tournaments at neutral ground. So they were pretty sophisticated about competitive Magic. And when the announcement of the Pro Tour happened, every single person, basically started dialing the number to get an invite. It was pretty crazy. Pretty much everyone at neutral ground got in to the event. And myself and Tony Perotti, who was our head judge at the Grey Matter event, we decided that it was more important for us for the event to succeed. And we wanted to do whatever we could to help that happen by being judges at that first event. Because, we knew the players, we knew, hey, check his sleeves, right? We knew who was who, and we wanted to be able to provide some assistance that way. So I actually ended up judging at the first Pro Tour. I was judging on the top floor. I judged at the juniors event, and Tony was on the judge staff on the main floor for the seniors event.
Yeah, for those that don't know, real quickly, a few things you had mentioned I just want to explain. To get into the tournament, we invited a small handful of players who had done well at certain events. But other than that, you had to call on the phone. That's how you got invited, was you called on the phone. And then, there was both a normal Pro Tour and a junior Pro Tour. The junior, I guess, was upstairs. And so anyway, okay, so let's segue a little bit into the Pro Tour here. I'm trying to go roughly chronologically, but let's go into the Pro Tour a little bit since you have some history with the Pro Tour. Okay. So you played on the Pro Tour I think 4 times, is that right?
5 times, I believe.
5 times, okay.
So once as an individual, and then 4 times on team events. Twice at Madison Square Garden, and twice in Boston. And I think my best finish was 13th.
That's
which
pretty
was
good.
at the second Pro Tour in New York at Madison Square Garden, which, won me essentially a TV.
Okay.
Yeah, I won $1,100 playing in that tournament, bought a Sony Trinitron, which I then held on to well into the era of flat screen TVs, because it was my trophy from that event. I'm like, well, shouldn't we get a new TV? No, we're keeping this 8 million pound Trinitron because it commemorates the one time I did well at Magic.
Okay, so when did you transition from playing to reporting? Because I know early on you were one of the people that did a lot of coverage of the Pro Tour.
So I did a ton of coverage for Magic tournaments and other events for the Neutral Ground website. So one of the things that we really pioneered on the Neutral Ground site and with our events in general was this idea like, no, you can't keep your deck list secret, right? If you remember, there was a long time where people would choose whether or not their deck list would get published. If I choose to share it, right? There was like a lot of secrecy around it. We started running a lot of events, and we were like, look, if you want this deck list not to be published, it's set on our deck sheets, drop right now. Because if you hand in this deck list, we're going to publish it. We would publish all the deck lists. We would, publish all the winning deck lists, and we would do lots of analysis of them. So I got kind of into doing that in the late 90s to early 2000s through the Neutral Ground site. And I was at a couple pro tours in the early 2000s where I was competing, and when I was done rather early in those events, I got asked to help do coverage. So I think my first coverage assignment might have been on day 2 or day 3 of one of the Pro Tour Bostons, where I got asked to like cover a quarterfinal or something like that.
How did you segue with doing written coverage to doing commentary?
So I am terrified of public speaking, or I still think I'm terrified of public speaking. I'm obviously not, right? But it was something I was always terrified of. A famous event in my family when I was in junior high school where I faked laryngitis for a month to not have to give a speech before a class in school. Like I was always terrified of being out in this place where I would have to speak to people. And I was doing written coverage for Wizards, and Randy kept trying to get me to do anything with the team that was doing stuff on camera. Not even necessarily the booth, right? Because there was always Randy and someone else in the booth. But, he's like, hey, why don't you do a recap at the end of the day? Or why don't you do, and kept pushing. And I was like, oh, really uncomfortable. And then I don't know what happened, but I decided, the hell with it. Let me try it. And actually got a chance to be in the booth. And it was pretty exhilarating, right? Like it's, no net, right? You talk about the idea that this is a podcast where you don't edit it, right? Like we just go, right? It's that same thing. It's like, no net. Wow, this is terrifying, but kind of fun and exciting. And, getting to watch these people who I've seen grow up with the game play at the highest level, I felt, in a great position to be able to talk about those people and talk about those players, which, eventually sort of shaped the way that my career went from doing commentary to being more of an observer of the game, more of a reporter of the game.
And you did coverage for many, many years. How many years did you do commentary?
So I started doing written coverage in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Did that up until Yokohama, I want to say in 2008, where I started doing commentary. Did that so I probably did that for 10 years then until I think beginning of 2019 is when I retired. So that was Mythic Championship 1 in Cleveland, that autumn one.
So do you have any favorite story of your time doing commentary?
So my favorite story of doing commentary is actually all my favorite stories are about hanging out with people, right? And getting to watch players grow in the game and succeed. And it would be hard to narrow it down, but I think my favorite moment in the booth is like the Frank Karsten, Terry So kind of double bluff, which was also my first event that I covered. where it's just like, wait a minute, what's going on? Is he bluffing? Is he double bluffing? What? And, and just for me, that's just a favorite moment because I felt like, oh, okay, even if I'm maybe wrong here or not, I felt comfortable building the excitement and talking about what was going on and sharing that space with Randy, which was, intimidating because Randy's such a huge presence in the game. And yeah, I would say that the bond, the corny answer is the bond with the people who make coverage. That's a family to me. That as much as, when I talked about that, finding that family when you go into a comic store or a game store, finding those people who tell stories, you're in that circle, Mark, there's a real bond there and something that feels so special to me. And I feel so grateful for the opportunity to have done for so many years.
Okay, well, let's segue from that. So another role you've filled many roles over the years, is you were the MTG historian. So talk a little bit how did that happen? How did you become the historian? How did that happen?
I like to call myself the Pro Tour historian emeritus now. But yeah, so in 2005, I think was that 2005, right around Ravnica, Chris Galvin and a couple of people at Wizards came up with the idea of the Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame, at the time called the Pro Tour Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And, we're looking at like the idea. I mean, it seems crazy to think now, right? Especially since the game was not that old, but we had players who were just no longer playing the game. Some of the game's biggest stars had moved on, had grown away from the game, didn't have the time necessarily as, I guess, functioning adults to go out every weekend and grind their way back onto the Pro Tour at a PTQ or, that. And so the idea of a Hall of Fame came about, there were some pretty big names. And there was a lot of stuff that went into the Hall of Fame, a ceremony, talking to the players, creating profiles, collecting deck lists, getting photos. And I basically got contracted to be the curator for that and did that from 2005 right up until whatever the last induction was with Reed. I think that was 2018. So, 13 years of Hall of Fame inductions. So, and, it was great. I got to, induct John Finkel, who's someone I've known since he was, a kid. I got to induct Zvi Moshowitz, Rob and Darwin and Dave, who used to come to my events. It was really cool to see. And then, pulled those players back into the game. I think without the Hall of Fame, John Finkel, still probably plays a little Magic once in a while with his friends, but he doesn't rediscover the game as an adult and then, put together another 2 careers that each individually would be worthy of Hall of Fame induction, right? Yeah, so it really changed the face of the game.
My memory is whenever we would have a Hall of Fame, you would come to Wizards and then you would interview people so you could put together the things. Yeah, and so I always like, okay, what can I say about so-and-so? And then it'd be...
Right, there's so much pressure. And I have my checklist of the things I want people to say. Like, we need something about not blocking the wolf here, right? So it was, it was, that was a lot of fun. I really loved doing that. I don't know what the Hall of Fame is going to look like moving forward. Would love to still be involved with it. It's, something that, I feel like I've been involved with Magic for all but its earliest black bordered days. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I love celebrating that history and being around the people who've had the game be such a big part of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I share a love of Magic history, so it is it is fun to look back at all that. I mean, part of the reason I'm doing all these interviews is to interview all these people that have had a big role in Magic. Okay, so let's talk another thing that you did. You spent some time as a columnist. So, So, back in 2002, I helped get Aaron Forsythe hired. And then he and I really made the Magic website. And I don't think you weren't one of the initial columnists, but you came along pretty soon after.
Yeah, I was doing some stuff for the sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
I was writing a column about going to a PTQ every weekend and my attempts to succeed there. But then once I, was out of the event, would kind of chronicle who made the top 8, who won, what the decks were, and was doing that for the sideboard like every other week or so. Had been started, and that ended up leading into doing some coverage at a couple pro tours. And then in 2003, I announced that I was selling Neutral Ground. I was ready to do something else. 9/11 had a pretty profound effect on our business and on everybody's mindsets about what you're doing. And I really wanted to be back on the creative side of my life. I started my career out making comic books and was looking to do more of that. In fact, was writing comics for Marvel at the time that this happened. And so I announced that I was going to be leaving Neutral Ground and sort of moving into this new chapter of my life where I was going to be trying to support myself as a writer. And I think I hit send or publish on the website, and then an email came in from Aaron saying like, hey, we'd like you to do like a once a month column on, Daily MTG or whatever it was called at the time. And, which referenced Beth Morsland's old was Deconstructing Magic. Mm. So I was doing Deconstructing Famous Decks or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I was taking famous decks and then trying to build some new version of them in the current standard format. So Punza or, whatever, Hatred or whatever the deck was, and trying to find some modern equivalent of it. And then that led into me taking over after Alex Schwartzman left. Alex was doing the sort of weekly competitive Magic column. I don't remember what it was called at the time.
The week that was.
No, it wasn't called that.
Okay.
So it was called something else. I took that over, and then at some point we changed the name of the column to Swimming with Sharks.
Oh, right.
And then after Swimming with Sharks, I think got handed off to Mike. Then my sort of weekly Magic synopsis kind of branched off, and that became The Week That Was, which interestingly kicked off with a fake The Week That Was about the first Pro Tour.
Okay.
I think it was like the 10th anniversary or something like that, or of the first Pro Tour. And so that was like 2006 when I started doing that, The Week That Was. And then I did that for a long time until whatever that last big move away from having all the daily columnists on the website was.
Okay, well, you mentioned Mike Flores, so we'll get you the last role that I know you've done is that you have a podcast. You and Mike have been doing for a long time. So let's talk about.
We've been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 14 years, and probably less if you account for frequency, because we don't do it on a regular basis. But Top 8 Magic is a podcast that Mike and I started when I was publishing books about Magic. I published a collection of Mike's early internet writings from the dojo and the Usenet groups and Star City and all these different websites where he'd written over the years. And we published a book called Decade. And so we started doing a podcast to promote that. And, the book did okay, but the podcast lived on. And we did that. I've been doing it for 15 years. I would say I probably do about 20 episodes, 25 episodes a year at this point, mm-hmm. in varying frequency. Part of the appeal of the podcast for Mike and I is very similar to what you do with Drive for Work. We like to be on a street in Manhattan and just talking into like a recorder. We like the ambient noise. We like jackhammers and fire trucks and people randomly asking us for directions in the middle of a podcast. So it's been a little difficult. Like Mike and I can't do this. It doesn't work for us. Mm-hmm. So I've actually been leaning very heavily on Zvi, Hall of Famer Zvi Moshowitz, for the last year or so. And he's been, taking a more spiky approach than Mike as we've done the podcast over the last year.
So anyway, I can almost see my desk here, so we're close to done. But I wanted you sort of, do you have a final sort of thought looking back at 27 years of interacting with Magic?
I mean, I am amazed by the profound effect Magic has had on my life, just in terms of friendships, opportunities, both in the game and around the game. The opportunity to be randomly recognized on the street sometimes. That's it's all been kind of amazing. And again, I talk about that idea that I was a very shy kid, and I don't think that's an image people have of me now. And I think that is in large part due to Magic, sort of drawing me out of my shell and giving me a soapbox to yell about something that I'm passionate about. And so I'm very grateful for that, and grateful for like the lifelong friends I've made in the game. Really, it's kind of amazing. I love the idea that I could go anywhere in the world, open up Facebook and go, oh, okay, here's this person I know, let's meet for coffee, right? Like, I mean, there's almost no country in the world where I can't do that. So it's been a phenomenal experience. And one of the things I love about Magic is it doesn't feel even remotely close to, like, normally you do something for 27 years and you're like, okay, and that's been great. But, I still play Magic every day. I still think about Magic. I still build decks. I still make plans to see friends. I still look forward to going to events when we're allowed to go to events again. So we're just getting started.
Okay, well, I see my desk, so we all know what that means. It means this is the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking Magic, it's time for me to be making Magic. But I want to thank you for joining us. This has been great. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mark. I'm really thrilled to have been here. Thanks.
Okay, guys. Well, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.